there's a loophole in the 13th Amendment that says slavery is no longer allowed in the United States unless it's for punishment. So
Yeah,
immediately,
exactly.
bad actors, specifically Confederate states, just took that as an excuse to continue enslaving black people by arresting them for the dumbest stuff, jaywalking, go to jail.
Right.
Now you're back on the plantation. And to this very day, there is a Louisiana plantation that still operates slavery. It's called Angola. And now it's a federal state prison. But prior to it becoming a state prison, it was a plantation that had hundreds of slaves working it. To this day, it has hundreds of slaves doing agricultural work in Louisiana, guards on horseback with rifles.
Welcome to Third Side Convo with your host, Bob Phipps. Your panelists today are Don Thomas, Jeff Nolan, Michelle Walters, and Peter Gallo. And now, your host, Bob Phipps.
Everyone is patting themselves on the back today, celebrating the end of slavery in 1865, like it's some completed chapter in a dusty textbook. But here's the truth. Slavery never ended. It just changed uniforms, crossed borders, and started working double shifts in the shadows. Now, right this second, there are over 50 million people in some sort of chains. Now, some are digging for cobalt for your phone. Some are sewing your cheap T-shirts. Some are cooking your shrimp. Well, we celebrate freedom while we buy oppression on sale. So tonight, we're going to ask the question no one wants to touch. Are we really free, or are we just comfortably complicit? And now, Jeff, you jumped in on this one right away, and you said you wanted to be in on this show. Tell me why.
Well, I mean, I just think it's a topic I feel like participating in on Juneteenth. That it makes sense to me.
Okay.
And I think that there's a number of forms of slavery that have never ended that we can discuss.
Absolutely.
Right.
Go, Michelle. Keep going, Michelle.
I mean, absolutely. I think that Juneteenth, though, now it is a federal holiday in representation of the end of slavery. But like you stated, though, I mean, slavery has not been eradicated in the sense that we think that it is. And it's something that is currently taking place here in the United States as well as everywhere else. So as we sit there in our parades and all this other type of stuff, we need to really honestly sit there and ask ourselves, you know what I mean? Is slavery truly, truly eradicated from our lives? And the answer is no.
Donnie.
I agree with you 100%. It's just slavery just reformed itself into another era. We went from like the whips and the chains to like, with money and power now. So it's still slavery in a sense. You don't see the chains and the whips, but you've seen people being incarcerated or locked down or anything like that, and forced to work for pennies.
Right. Peter, how do you see these things?
I think everyone's correct, with one notable point of correction is that you're focusing very much on the end of slavery in the United States. The British Empire ended slavery 30 years earlier and had something like 20,000 men in the Royal Navy patrolling the Atlantic, stopping the slave trade. But it's been a phenomenon of human society since earliest time, and it continues to exist, not exclusively in those Middle East and other third world countries. There was a case very recently where, to the great embarrassment of all concerned, a United Nations judge was prosecuted for trafficking in the United Kingdom. Wow. Largely because of domestic servants being held in grossly exploitative conditions. and that is a common feature in countries that rely heavily on overseas contract workers. And at the risk of naming names, Saudi Arabia takes in a lot of Filipino, Indonesian, and other domestic helpers, and they are not always all treated well.
Yes.
Hey, Jeff, what do
Right.
you think is kind of an egregious example of this that gets to you? Because I don't think you're right. We're just not thinking about it, are we?
Well, I mean, I think that we're the 13th Amendment loophole in the United States is despicable, and has just extended slavery as it was known in the Civil War era. It's just extended it through now, only under the guise of punishment in prisons. It's insane. And
Can you explain that
major-
for us, Jeff? Explain what that is for our listeners, because obviously,
there's a loophole in the 13th Amendment that says slavery is no longer allowed in the United States unless it's for punishment. So immediately,
exactly.
bad actors, specifically Confederate states, just took that as an excuse to continue enslaving black people by arresting them for the dumbest stuff, jaywalking, go to jail.
Right.
Now you're back on the plantation. And to this very day, there is a Louisiana plantation that still operates slavery. It's called Angola. And now it's a federal state prison. But prior to it becoming a state prison, it was a plantation that had hundreds of slaves working it. To this day, it has hundreds of slaves doing agricultural work in Louisiana, guards on horseback with rifles.
and I thought
very
that was all done by illegals, right? I guess not. It's more than just that.
No.
God, no, I didn't.
Necessarily.
Is it not true that the labor force in Angola are actually convicted felons?
Exactly.
So they can be enslaved. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, what's your definition of slavery?
Forced labor. Forced labor.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that one, though. I mean, and I have to admit, I stand with Peter on this one, where I don't necessarily see incarceration in the same facet that I see a person that is enslaved or indentured servant. No, I mean, when I think of slavery, I think of somebody.
The reason it exists was to keep black people working plantations.
Well,
That's
absolutely.
the reason that cutout in the 13th Amendment exists.
Yes, but you could say that about every agricultural property south of the Mason-Dixon.
What other than prison labor, what agricultural properties south of the Mason-Dixon used unpaid forced labor?
Human trafficking.
Every last one of them prior to the abolition of slavery.
Well, no, I get that. I'm talking about today, Peter.
It's a form of like it's being in prison, like people getting sentenced 20, 30 years in prison for a minor crime.
That's fine. But what is the difference between having, if you're locked up in prison, what is the difference between sewing mailbags, stamping out license plates, or doing agricultural labor?
Very little. Very little.
Very little
difference.
difference.
Angola as an example, because it is the prime example, because it was a slavery-driven plantation before it became a prison, and it still operates in very much the same way.
The same capacity. He's absolutely right. Like a lot of the prisons do.
Yeah, but it's not a
operate.
plantation anymore. I mean, now it's a prison. I think that we're talking about completely
What's
two
the
different
difference?
things. I feel like it's apples and oranges.
What's
I
the
mean,
difference?
if we look at slavery, though, and the capacity to where somebody is forced against their will to sit there and be, not incarceration. I mean, incarceration is anybody that's going to sit there and be behind locked, locked in a jail cell. I mean, that's completely different. We're talking about innocent people that were actually forced over here into this country to sit there and to serve at this, at the care of a master. Beyond their will, they were raped, they were beaten, they had no chance of escape. There was no exit strategy. There was no prison
slavery in the pre-Civil War era. It's still a form of slavery. Forced labor is slavery.
So what are you suggesting? That everybody in prison should just get cable TV and not
Wow,
be
that's a
Exactly,
quite a
I
leap.
know. Yeah,
Not
chill out.
necessarily if they
That's
want
quite a
it.
leap. No, I think they should have free drinks and happy hours and should be able to sit on a beach. And I mean, Peter, come on, that's disingenuous. To go from, gee, they shouldn't be forced to labor in order to profit private corporations, which is what happens, to, oh, they should have cable TV. You just went from 0 to 1,000 on me.
No, what do you want? What do you expect the incarcerated population to do?
I expect
during
the
the
incarcerated population to not be used as cheap or free labor for private industry to increase profit.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
is it okay that they are used for, forced labor for government agencies?
I'm not a fan of that either.
No.
The only well, first of all, I'm not a fan of forced. That I have a problem with that particular word. I don't like it. And if people want to work in a prison environment and what they do there makes the facility self-sustaining, that's a different conversation in my mind. But when the prison labor is being farmed out to private industry, that is despicable. I don't see how we're having any. How are we not all agreeing with
Well,
that?
let me jump in. Hold on, we're gonna jump in again. Let me jump in a second because we're gonna go ahead and take our first break, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit more around the world. The whole prison thing, I certainly understand where people think that's slightly different than maybe the 8 million people in India or the whatever the case may be. But let's go around the little world. Let's go around the world. But first, please stop and subscribe on YouTube or on ThirdSide.com, and we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call Your Computer Solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad. My computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling Your Computer Solutions at 407-826-0810. The Tri-Beer Show would like to thank Boggy Creek Airboat Adventures for being one of our sponsors. I got to go on an airboat and saw a real gator. I even got to go to the gem mine and mine for some gems. We ate a steak dinner at the restaurant and even got some gator bites. If you want to have a blast with the entire family, I suggest you go to www.bcairboats.com right now. Get your tickets today. The website again is bcairboats.com.
All right, welcome back. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to leave the prison system, and that one, it sounds like we got a little bit of a difference of opinion there. But I really want to talk about things that we use every day that slave labor has been the reason for it, the reason we can get them so cheap, the reason we can do all those things. So who would like to start with probably the most egregious example of something we use every day that is clearly being done by slave labor? Who's first?
I was going to say China. Yeah, I mean, China, our
Jeff.
phones, our phone, yeah, everything. Absolutely, everything. No, go ahead, Jeff. Absolutely, go ahead.
No, I feel like it dominated the last segment, and I don't want to be obnoxious.
We did good.
You're always fine.
I would say the chocolate industry is one of the
all right, chocolate's
most
one.
outrageous. Yeah.
Jewelry.
Okay.
Chocolate, jewelry, and
Not only
I
that,
think
I mean, you know, it's. I mean, there's a variety. There's a plethora of different things, though, that we sit there and we utilize in our everyday lives that utilize forced labor, and that's very unfortunate. And it's one of those to where, as a society, you know what I mean, we should be able to sit there and represent Juneteenth in its truest form and try to be able to sit there and eradicate this from not only here but everywhere else.
All right,
Well,
Peter, go.
Peter's
What you think, Peter? What are the worst ones that you think that we do?
Jump up and down and say everything in China is the proceeds of slave labor. Let me say, based on 19 years of living in the area, I kind of disagree with that in principle. The question then becomes of working conditions. The working conditions that you might not like or might not appreciate in the United States does not automatically make something slave labor. That is the problem. and it is a question of looking at individual cases. The idea that iPhones are made by slave labor, is a bit of a stretch. The best example of slave labor in the 20th century was the Nazis that used slave labor for basically construction for the war effort in Germany, and it was grossly inefficient, and it produced substandard, because quite frankly the people working there didn't want to be there and did everything they possibly could to sabotage your products, right? And they were worked to death for doing so, because it didn't actually occur to the Germanic management style that if you actually fed these people, they would be able to work harder, and they wouldn't actually be trying to, they probably would actually still be trying to sabotage everything you do. But there are millions and millions of people, not only in China, but in every other developing countries, that are working for salaries that you will laugh at, right? With a couple of $100 a month, if that. But
well, it's
alternative.
Yeah, it's really not. China is the longest running in slavery. It's actually Korea, North Korea, and North Korea is one of the longest running slaveries in the history of slaves, or enslaving people, and still today they're kind of still enslaving people with the North Korea regime. So they still kind of use that, because a lot of people in the country, they can't leave, they have to work under circumstances. So it's one of the still modern form of slavery that's going on right now in front of our faces, because North Korea's got is a lockdown. These people got to work, basically starving, and they got to do everything Kim Jong-un says,
Okay.
Well, a lot of women, though, for North Korea, though, is able to sit there and export a lot of the women, though, to be prearranged marriages, though, in China. And that's like at least, I don't know, like 22 million or something outrageous.
Peter touched on a really crucial one at the beginning. Peter, at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned the scandal in Britain with the MP that had the domestic help that was effectively a slave. And that is more pervasive, I think, than people realize. People come in and they're held under, their immigration, and they're effectively turned into slaves by
their passports are confiscated routinely, right? Their visa conditions are so onerous that they can't just go out. I mean, I did this. I was involved in helping a number of domestic helpers abused by their employers when I was in Hong Kong, and I mean, other than the fact that they're not bought and sold for cash, all right, it is indentured servitude.
All right. Well, go on, Peter. Sorry.
The question is, what can, I mean, other than recognizing that there is a problem with it, the real question is what can be done? Like, what can we do sitting here in the United States about the fact that North Korea, I think every person other than the senior political leadership are essentially, indentured to the state.
Yeah.
And will fit pretty much any definition of slavery.
Okay, so all of these situations, let's start talking a little bit, kind of halfway through the show. No, what can be done? I mean, the point's been raised here that, like Peter says, is it just a matter of they don't pay them very much, working conditions are bad, maybe not the same thing as, slavery is known as. You've got 8 million in India, right, that are of a caste whereby they're held down. What can we do here in the U.S. for those things? Anybody got some thoughts?
One of the things that I do like, though, is the tariffs that are being implemented, though. I mean, we're trying to sit there and make sure that, and I know you're sitting there and you're squinching at me, Jeff. I was like, I know. No, but I have to admit, though, I mean, it's one of those to where when we're able to sit there and bring jobs back here, at least we can have some type of oversight that these things, at least it's better than these kids that are sitting there and working from sunup to sundown in China or North Korea or India making, $200 shoes, for our companies to sit there and be manufactured and make huge profits by. So, I mean, if we're able to sit there and at least tariff some of these other countries that have these atrocities that are taking place, at least it's one way or another to try to offer incentive to bring some of these companies to start working back over here in America.
Never going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, exactly. Well, I just say, well, Bob, one thing we can't do as consumers and people don't realize, like for chocolate or coffee, if we can ever get together and say, hey, look, for one day, or just say, you pick a day or pick a month, or say, hey, nobody drinks any day coffee for one day. And then watch the market just crash and say, if you don't stop doing the slave labor, we'll do it again. Just the threat of that is an opportunity to get people to start looking at the right directions and getting people aware of what's going on. Then you can actually, we still have the power of the people. We can boycott. And it's like one day, it's not going to kill America not to drink coffee for one day, but it'll send a message to these countries. If you don't stop doing what you're doing, we'll keep doing it for a week. And see how that was, something like that. That's a start. As Americans getting aware of what's going on, people can actually start doing things on their own.
Okay, so what are those things we could and should be doing? Is anybody pissed about it? Does anybody care? I mean, or is it just something a part of life? In other words, is there any area where, again, we're terming it slavery, where we should be doing something?
I think that as individually we care, but as a group, we largely don't. And that's, I hate to say that out loud, but I believe that's true. I don't think that speaking, I can only speak to what I feel about America. This is where I live. I feel that this country is no way willing to give up 1% of affordability and convenience to fix maybe 10% of a problem that they don't see with their own eyes every day.
You know what, though? I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't agree with that. I think that when you're able to have public pressure put on a particular circumstance, where you look at, let's say, the blood diamond trade, there was a tremendous amount of pressure that was put on the manufacturers and people that were buying these, to ensure that they were not blood diamonds. And overall, we have to be able to sit there and hit them economically. That's the only way to, one way or another, to stop these trades. But first of all, it needs to be awareness, and then being able to sit there and come at them economically.
Well, I think that's true for a luxury item, and you're not wrong. The blood diamond awareness definitely made a difference. You also have a generation of kids now who aren't into diamonds the way that their previous generations were. But you're not wrong there. But I think that if what we're talking about, if there was a wholesale push in this country to have corporations and retailers not use slave or slave adjacent labor, like for example, Walmart would go out of business tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. So would Amazon.
Hey, Peter, is there any pressure overseas? Is this even talked about overseas? Is this, this whole concept?
Country in the United States.
Not as much.
That there. And it is not my area, and I have to confess I didn't have time to research it. But there is legislation, as there is legislation dealing with overseas corruption and other issues, that companies can be fined and can be targeted for the use of exploitative labor practices. There is, I don't want to use the word industry, it makes it bigger than it is, but I know of a number of people based in Hong Kong and China whose business basically revolves around visiting factories.
Wow.
And identifying factories that are shall we say not living up to international standards.
Got it. Well, I guess we've got to have some international standards first. Maybe this is something the UN should do. Well, you're such a big proponent of the UN, right there, Peter? They're always out there doing the right thing. So listen, we got to go on and take our next break. And we're going to get back, and maybe we're going to figure out something, or maybe we're not going to do anything, and we're just going to push it down the road like we always do. I don't know. But please check us out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, thirdsideconvo.com. Please check us out, and we'll be right back after a word from a sponsor.
Corona Cigar Company is your one-stop shop for all your cigar needs. Whether that's a brand new humidor, a box of those new cigars you've been waiting for, a top-of-the-line cutter or lighter, a place to enjoy the finest cigars and spirits with friends, or the only cigars grown right here in the Sunshine State, we've got you covered. Come visit one of our retail locations for the ultimate cigar experience. Visit us online at coronacigar.com.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
All right, we are back, and Jeff wanted Peter to go on and finish his point that he was making before we had to break away for our commercial, and then we're going to really figure out if there's any of these things we actually should do, or should we just ignore it and go on with our lives. Peter, what was the point you were making that I had to cut you off on for the commercial? Do you remember? Peter, did you freeze? Hey,
You kind of freeze again.
Hey, Jeff, that's
Yeah.
okay. Jeff, what was he saying that you were trying to finish? I know you weren't doing it so that you could slam him. What was he?
No, not at all. I think that Peter, has a more international perspective than the three of us, and I think it's important to hear.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Wait.
Yes, absolutely.
What-
It's important. But one of the nice things though is, I've seen a lot of pressure placed on individual companies that are utilizing manufacturers, clothing primarily, manufacturers in places that are utilizing
I'm
child labor, slave labor,
fully in favor of
unfathomable practices. Oh,
Hold
is
on, Peter.
back?
You ready, Peter?
product boycott.
Back? Go ahead.
Go. There you are.
But in
Okay.
reality, not every coffee bean is.
Oh, we got some. We're freezing on you, Peter. We're gonna have to go back to Michelle.
Yeah. Freezer having some freezer problems.
Well, no.
No, but one of the things I wanted to say though is there have been a lot of pushback from especially celebrities that come out and tout various different product lines, beauty products, and a lot of things that us, as consumers, that we utilize quite a bit of. And these watch groups have come through and put a spotlight on where these particular items are being manufactured overseas and the conditions that are taking place. And the good thing is they are bringing awareness to it, and they are, putting a spotlight on making aware to the consumers on if you want to engage in this practice of purchasing these items or not, or the particular, brand, celebrity needs to go in and do some changes in with regards to their manufacturing. So there have been changes that they're slow, but it is.
I hate to think we're waiting on the celebrities to figure out how to do the right thing. Don, we got just only a couple minutes left. What is that one thing that you'd like to protest on that you think should be protests on? You got 15 seconds.
Well, I like the shoes is a good question to be, but just make one point that every country in the world has slavery, so there's no one that was ever immune to it.
Okay.
And so I think it'd be shoes or chocolate would be one of my top one to get.
Cool. It's the problem with saying with the women, though. I think the guys could do without chocolate better than the women generally, but I'm not sure about that.
And it's because I had to buy it all these years. Shoes and chocolate was it.
There you go. Yeah, but the guys like the the pumps and the Reeboks and all that other stuff. Jeff, is there anything that maybe this isn't really slavery and we can live with it? Is there something?
I'd like to see in this country companies, corporations, retailers have to disclose the nature of where they source their materials. if it comes from prison labor, overseas slave labor, anything that is under market and exploitative. I mean, this is never going to happen. This is panacea, pie in the sky stuff. It's never going to happen.
Well, maybe we'll get away. Maybe we will. Maybe we can focus on something like that. Hey, Peter, you said it's
Republicans in office. It'll never happen.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But it didn't change before. I mean, have we said this is going on all along? Peter, do you see any changes going on?
Well, can I just mention the elephant in the corner that nobody wants to talk about?
That's what I want.
Clearly, I would put it to you that the worst form of slavery, indentured servitude, is the sex trafficking of women and children. And you've had a government for the last 4 years that's let in 9 million what you call undocumented aliens without actually concerned about what was coming in with that number. And now you've got people protesting because they want to defend the right to break your immigration laws. So provided you're doing that, and provided that is what large sections of society think is an appropriate approach to life, I think there's a bit of hypocrisy in being concerned about you don't like the salary levels that are being paid to people in Shandong.
Now, hey Peter, you're right, because we're taking, these are people that are choosing to earn that amount of money. It may seem like slavery to us, but it's everything to them. So, and maybe we'll take your role of the sex slavery with Shell and you, and we'll make that our goal to work on that in Third Side Convo. That's another show. So here we go, guys. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for being here and listening. And, we never know how this thing's going to work. Please subscribe, Third Side Convo, get in the conversation. And now we're going to go to the after show. We're going to see what people really think, because we got some people in that after show, too. We're having fun, and we will see you next week for another edition of Third Side Convo. Thank you.